Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're really cutting straight to the heart of things. We're looking at one of the most foundational texts, well, ever. If you're trying to get a handle on, the big narratives of Western thought, or maybe you're wrestling with those huge questions about, like, where things went wrong and what divine purpose looks like, well, you're in the right spot. Our deep dive today is zooming in on the book of Genesis, specifically those opening chapters. And we're not just, reading it as an old story. We want to analyze the structure, the blueprint, really, of how a perfect world was supposedly set up, and then almost immediately how it starts to unravel because of, moral failure. Our goal here is to see how those first acts of creation really define everything that comes after, especially this recurring tension, this back and forth between human chaos and divine faithfulness.
Yeah, it really is the ultimate origin story. And if you don't quite grasp the structure right at the beginning, you kind of miss the echoes throughout the rest of the Bible. It sets the stage. Genesis means literally the birth of the world, sure. But it's doing so much more than just cosmology. It's fundamentally, like you said, the beginning of the entire biblical story. Yeah. Because it lays down these patterns right away. God creates order, humanity tends towards disorder, chooses chaos, and then God doesn't just scrap it. He stays involved, working through a specific people, making covenants. That pattern starts here.
Okay, let's start right there with the name itself. We call it Genesis, but that's not what it was originally called, is it? What are we sort of missing by using the Greek name instead of the Hebrew one?
Well, the original Hebrew title is Bereshit. It's much simpler, more direct, really. It just means in the beginning because, that's literally the first word of the book. So it immediately throws the focus onto the absolute starting point, the beginning of time, space, creation, action. It's the ultimate statement of origin, very direct.
In the beginning. Much more immediate. So how did we end up with Genesis? Where did that come from?
That shift happens later with the Septuagint. That's the early Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. The translators use the Greek word Genesis, which means birth, or maybe generation. They thought it fit, obviously, because the book describes the birth of the world. But the word Genesis actually does more work than just describing the start. It becomes a structural marker.
A structural marker? How so?
Yeah, the noun Genesis, often translated as generations or account or history, pops up repeatedly throughout the book. It divides the whole narrative into sections. You get phrases like, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth right after the creation week, or this is the book of the generations of Adam, or Noah.
Okay. So it's like chapter breaks, almost, signaling a new phase of the story.
Exactly. It tells you this isn't just one long rambling story. It's structured. It's built around these unfolding family histories, these generations. It shows the story moving forward, family by family, generation by generation. It's a series of, beginnings.
That does reframe it. It's not just the beginning, but the beginning of all these subsequent lines, these unfolding purposes. Okay, so let's get into that initial blueprint. You mentioned structure. We need to slow down and really look at how Genesis 1 builds the world. What's the basic problem God is tackling in those very first verses before creation starts?
Right. Genesis 1 verse 2 lays it out pretty clearly. The earth was tohu wabohu in Hebrew, usually translated formless and void, or without form and empty. So you've got this undifferentiated, chaotic, empty mess, watery chaos, darkness. And the 6 days of creation, they systematically address those two problems, formlessness and emptiness. Days 1 to 3 tackle the formlessness by creating distinct realms or structures. Days 4 to 6 tackle the emptiness by filling those realms.
Okay, formless and void. So days 2 and 3 are key for the form part. Let's unpack day 2 first, Genesis 1 verses 7 and 8. This one always feels a bit abstract. God doesn't seem to make anything new substance-wise.
That's a great observation. Day 2 is all about establishing structure through separation. It's crucial. God makes the expanse, the rakia. We usually translate it as sky or firmament. And the key action, the defining act, is separation. He separates the water under the expanse from the water above it. Imagine it. Before this, it's all just watery chaos. Now, boom, a boundary. This creates a kind of three-tiered world picture common in ancient thought. Waters above, this middle realm of air or sky, and waters below. It's literally making room, creating a habitable, differentiated space.
So it's like putting in the ceiling and the floor for where life will eventually happen. And then immediately after creating this structure, there's an act of naming. That seems important too.
Hugely important. God names the expanse sky. Naming in the ancient world wasn't just sticking a label on something. It was an act of authority. It defined the thing's purpose, its function, and it placed it under the namer's jurisdiction. So God creates this space, and then he defines it, claims it, orders it by calling it sky. It asserts his divine control.
Right. Order through structure, then order through naming and authority.
And interestingly, you pointed out it feels different. Day 2 is the only day that ends without God explicitly saying, and God saw that it was good.
Oh yeah, that's true. Why do you think that is?
Well, some scholars suggest maybe the structure itself isn't good until it's stable and ready for its function. The goodness comes when the whole system is set up and working. Maybe the separation of waters wasn't fully good until the land appeared, making the separation meaningful for life.
That makes sense. The structure needs its purpose, which leads us right into day 3. And day 3 is unique because it gets 2 distinct creative acts, right? It suggests it's pretty foundational.
Exactly. It's a powerhouse day for establishing the habitat. Part 1, verses 9 and 10, is about getting the geography sorted out. Achieving stability. God commands the waters under the sky to do something specific. Be gathered to one place. This action allows the dry ground to appear. So you're moving from just separation to active gathering and containment. The liquid chaos is finally given boundaries, solidified, made stable, land emerges.
And then comes the naming again.
Instantly. The dry ground is called land, and the gathered waters are called seas. Order, definition, stability.
And this is where we first hear that phrase, and God saw that it was good.
Yes, and that's telling, isn't it? The narrative pauses here to register divine approval. Why now? Because the land and seas are established in their proper places. They're distinct, stable, contained. The move from formless, watery flux to fixed, stable geography that is declared good, the foundation for life is now truly ready. The world is stable enough to support it.
Okay, so the stage is set. Stable land, contained seas. Then comes day 3, part 2. Verse 11, life appears.
Right. The stability immediately allows for productivity. God commands the land to produce vegetation. And notice the detail. It's not just plants. It's specifically seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it.
Seed-bearing, fruit with seed in it. That sounds intentional.
Oh, absolutely. This embeds the principle of ongoing life, of fertility and self-propagation right into the design from the very start. And there's another key phrase here. Everything is created according to their various kinds.
Yeah, that phrase gets repeated a lot in Genesis 1 for plants and animals. What's the significance of emphasizing kinds?
It's about establishing ordered diversity. It's not just a jumble of life. It's categorized, structured. It lays the groundwork for a stable biological world where life reproduces reliably within its ordained classification. It ensures the order God established isn't just a one-off event, but it's self-regulating, self-sustaining, perpetual. The design is complete. The physical world is now ordered, stable, fertile, and categorized. It's, well, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Methodical, structurally sound, self-sustaining. Chapter 1 gives us this incredible picture of cosmic order, which makes the next part even more jarring. If the world was made so perfectly, why does the rest of Genesis, starting almost immediately, show it all falling apart? How does it go wrong so fast?
That's the pivot, isn't it? We shift from the physical creation to the realm of moral choice, agency, and relationship. The text makes it clear that even in this perfect setup, perfection isn't automatic. It requires governance, relationship, and importantly, obedience. God immediately gives the pinnacle of his creation, humanity, a commission, but also a boundary. It starts with incredible freedom. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden.
Generous.
Right.
Totally. Seems like almost unlimited access.
Almost. But then comes the one, single restriction. But you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. One boundary.
That one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's often seen as like a trap or just a random rule. But narratively, what does that single prohibition actually achieve? What's its function in the story?
Well, I think it's the necessary condition for genuine relationship and moral agency. It's not arbitrary. That boundary establishes that humanity, despite its delegated authority over creation, is still under God's ultimate authority. They're dependent on him. By setting that one limit, God gives humanity the capacity for meaningful choice. They can choose trust and obedience, or they can choose autonomy, deciding for themselves what is good and evil.
So the boundary allows for real love, real trust, because it's freely chosen.
Exactly. Without the possibility of choosing no, the yes doesn't mean as much. It also keeps them anchored to the Creator as the source of moral definition. Grasping for that knowledge independently is where the trouble starts.
Okay, and even before that choice, before the fall, the text points out something that wasn't quite perfect yet, something God himself identified in chapter 2.
All right, Genesis 2, verse 18. God himself provides the first critique of the otherwise very good creation. It is not good for the man to be alone.
The relational aspect.
Precisely. I will make a helper suitable for him. This underlines that human flourishing isn't solitary. We're fundamentally relational beings. Connection, partnership, community that's built into our design. It's not an afterthought. It's essential goodness.
And before the woman is created, there's that fascinating scene where the man names the animals. What's happening there?
Yeah, verses 19 and 20. It highlights the man's unique role and initial solitude, but also his wisdom and authority. He's tasked with naming all the beasts of the field and all the birds in the sky. Remember what we said about naming? It's an act of discernment, understanding their nature and exercising delegated authority. Whatever he called them, that was its name. He's participating in God's ordering work.
But none of them were a suitable partner for him.
Exactly. The naming process confirms God's diagnosis. It's not good for the man to be alone. It sets the stage perfectly for the creation of the woman, completing the human relational structure intended from the beginning.
Okay, so perfect world, necessary boundary, relational completion. And then comes the crash. Genesis 3, the sin. Let's look closely at the fallout described in verses 13 to 16. How does that one act of disobedience immediately mess everything up?
The consequences are immediate and they ripple outwards, affecting every key relationship. The source material lays out this chain reaction. First, the serpent. It's cursed. Changed, physically relegated to crawling, eating dust. And crucially, a state of war, of enmity, is declared between its offspring and the woman's offspring. This sets up a long-term cosmic conflict, a hint of future struggle, and maybe eventual victory. One will crush the head, the others strike the heel.
A deep-seated conflict introduced right away. And for the humans.
For the woman, the consequence directly impacts her unique, life-giving role. Pain in childbearing is greatly increased. But perhaps even more profoundly, the harmony between the sexes is fractured. The text says her desire will be for her husband, and he will rule over her. That equal partnership, the suitable helper relationship, is immediately distorted into a dynamic of control and hierarchy. This struggle becomes a tragic, recurring feature of fallen human relationships.
So the perfect relational design is broken. And the chaos doesn't just stay within that first family's internal dynamic, does it? It escalates really quickly. Chapter 4, the very next story, we get murder.
It's shockingly fast. It shows how sin isn't static, it metastasizes. It moves from disobedience towards God to outright violence against one's own brother. When Cain gets angry because his offering isn't accepted, God actually warns him directly. It's a profound moment. Verses 6 and 7, God says, "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it."
Wow. Sin is personified there, like a predator waiting to pounce.
Exactly, an aggressive force. And God gives Cain the key. You must master it. He's given the choice, the warning, the path to overcoming it. It's almost like a mini manual for dealing with temptation.
But he doesn't master it.
He doesn't. He lures Abel into the field and kills him. And his response to God afterwards, chilling.
I'm my brother's keeper.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm a brother's keeper. It's defiant, it's cold, it shows the complete breakdown of responsibility, of community, of the basic care that should define human relationship. The relational fabric woven in Eden is torn to shreds. Failure spirals from the individual to the couple to the siblings.
And it keeps spiraling, right? The sources point to an even wider societal corruption. Next, with that really strange, kind of cryptic story Genesis sets about the sons of God and the Nephilim, what's going on there. It always feels like a weird interruption.
It is weird and notoriously difficult to interpret. Scholars have debated it for centuries. The sources acknowledge the main views. One interpretation is that the sons of God were rebellious angelic beings, spiritual entities who transgressed their proper boundaries by marrying human women. It's a violation of the cosmic order. The other main view is that sons of God refers to powerful human rulers, maybe ancient kings who claim divine lineage. Think of figures like Lamech in Cain's line, boasting about his violence. They were consolidating power.
So whether it's spiritual beings breaking boundaries or human kings acting like gods, the core issue is transgression and power abuse.
Precisely. The key action described is that they took any of them they chose, as wives, basically, acquiring women likely through force or coercion as property. It's a total violation of God's design for relationships. And the result, the birth of the Nephilim. The text calls them heroes of old, men of renown, often understood as mighty warriors. But the crucial point, regardless of the exact identity of the sons of God, is the overall outcome stated in verse 5. The wickedness of the human race had become great. Every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. And verse 11 adds, "The earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence."
So this episode, however strange, represents the tipping point. Corruption isn't just individual acts anymore. It's systemic. It's societal. It's violence filling the whole earth.
Exactly. It's gone from a garden transgression to family murder to full-blown, pervasive, systemic violence and corruption infecting God's entire creation. The order of Genesis 1 is being actively dismantled by human evil.
And this level of corruption prompts a reaction from God that's unlike anything we've seen so far. It's deeply emotional.
It really is. Genesis 6 gives us this window into the divine heart. God sees the violence, the corruption, and the text says his heart was filled with pain. He regretted that he had made human beings on the earth.
Regret. That's a strong word. Pain. It's not just judgment. It's personal grief.
Absolutely. It's profound pathos.
Yeah.
This isn't some detached deity. This is a creator deeply wounded by the way humanity is ruining his good world and destroying each other. So the motivation for the flood, seen through this lens, isn't just punishment. It's described in the source as stemming from a passion to protect the goodness of his creation. It's a radical, painful surgery to cut out the cancer of human evil that threatens to consume everything. He washes the world clean, preserving just Noah and his family.
Okay, so the flood is a reset, a drastic one.
Yeah.
Noah is saved, he's righteous, and he's basically commissioned as a new Adam, right?
Right.
He gets the same blessing, the same command to be fruitful and multiply. This should be the fresh start.
Hopes are definitely high at this point in the narrative. It feels like a genuine do-over. God even makes a covenant promising never to destroy the earth by flood again. And this is where Genesis just keeps hammering the point home. The pattern repeats itself with devastating speed. As the source material puts it, our hopes are high, but soon Noah fails too. And in a garden, no less.
In a garden.
Yeah.
The irony is intentional, sure.
Oh, it has to be. Adam failed in God's garden near a tree. Noah, the new hope, plants his own garden, a vineyard. And what happens? He makes wine, gets drunk, and passes out naked and ashamed in his tent.
Naked and ashamed, just like Adam and Eve after they ate the fruit.
Exactly. The echo is unmistakable. It demonstrates that the root problem wasn't just the external environment or the scale of societal wickedness before the flood. The problem is deeper. It's something fundamental within the human heart, the human moral nature. Wiping the slate clean didn't fix the core issue.
And just like the first failure led to relational breakdown, Noah's failure immediately leads to problems with his son, Ham, and a curse on Canaan. The cycle starts again.
The cycle starts again. It's a brutal narrative lesson. God creates order. Humanity chooses chaos. God intervenes, saves a remnant. The remnant fails. It proves pretty decisively that the ultimate solution isn't going to come from finding a perfectly righteous human or just hitting reset. Humanity can't fix itself.
So if the pattern is just repeated failure, how does the book of Genesis possibly end up being a story of hope? Where does it pivot away from this cycle?
That's the brilliance of the second half of Genesis. The focus shifts dramatically. Since human systems, whether it's powerful kingdoms built on violence like the Nephilim might represent, or even chosen families like Noah's inevitably fail, God initiates a different kind of plan. It's a plan based not on universal human improvement, but on God's own unilateral faithfulness, focused through one specific lineage. He decides to work through the mess, rather than constantly wiping it clean.
And that plan hinges on one person. Abram, later Abraham. His call is the major turning point.
Absolutely. Out of nowhere, seemingly, God calls this one man, Abram, from Ur, this pagan city. And he makes staggering promises to him. Promises of land, descendants, offspring, as numerous as the stars in the sky, and universal blessing flowing through him. And critically, God establishes this as an everlasting covenant. It's meant to last. This covenant isn't primarily based on Abram's performance, though obedience is involved. It's based on God's promise. It's designed to finally break the cycle by anchoring hope in divine initiative, not human perfection.
And this leads to maybe one of the most pivotal verses in the entire Bible, defining the basis of this new relationship.
Genesis 15:6. It's revolutionary. After God reiterates the promise of countless descendants, despite Abram being old and childless, the text says, Abram believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness.
Believe the Lord, righteousness. So right standing with God isn't earned through works or perfect law keeping here.
Not primarily. It's imputed based on faith, on trust. Abram simply took God at his word, trusted the promise even when it seemed impossible based on his circumstances. That act of faith, of reliance on God's faithfulness, is counted as righteousness. This becomes the bedrock principle for the rest of the biblical story of salvation. Trust in God's promise is key.
And this covenant relationship is marked physically too, with circumcision. Why the sign?
The sign, circumcision, serves as a constant physical reminder passed down through generations. It marked every male descendant as belonging to this covenant people. It signified that their identity and relationship with God wasn't something they achieved themselves, but something they were born into by God's grace and promise. It physically set them apart from the surrounding cultures, reminding them of their unique calling and God's faithfulness.
Okay, so God establishes this covenant of faith with Abraham's family. But let's be honest, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they're hardly models of perfect behavior, are they? There's deception, rivalry, fear, dysfunction. It seems like the failure cycle continues even within the chosen family.
That's absolutely crucial. Genesis doesn't sugarcoat the patriarchs. They are deeply flawed. Jacob steals his brother's blessing. Abraham lies about his wife twice. The family is messy, and that's precisely the point. God's covenant faithfulness persists despite their failures. The promise isn't dependent on their perfection. This leads us to the climax of Genesis, the story of Joseph.
Jacob's favorite son. His story seems to bring all these themes together: family dysfunction, betrayal, but also divine purpose.
Exactly. Joseph's story is the ultimate test case. It starts with the worst kind of family betrayal, fueled by Jacob's blatant favoritism, that infamous coat. The 10 older brothers, eaten up with jealousy, commit a heinous act. They kidnap Joseph, fake his death, and sell him into slavery in Egypt. It's the covenant family tearing itself apart from within. It looks like the absolute end of the promised line.
A total disaster. Human evil seems to win again, right at the heart of God's chosen people.
It seems that way, and the brothers certainly intended it for evil. But here's where the narrative masterfully shows God's hidden hand at work. The text repeatedly emphasizes the Lord was with Joseph. Even in slavery, even falsely accused and thrown in prison, God is orchestrating events. Joseph rises through interpretations of dreams, eventually catching Pharaoh's attention. Pharaoh recognizes something different about him, the Spirit of God, and elevates this Hebrew slave to be second in command over all of Egypt. It's an astonishing reversal.
And this position isn't just personal success for Joseph, is it? It's positioned strategically by God.
Absolutely. God uses Joseph's wisdom to prepare Egypt for a severe, widespread famine. And that famine, orchestrated by God, is what forces Joseph's brothers, the ones who betrayed him, to come begging to Egypt for food. Joseph, the betrayed brother, now holds the power of life and death over the very family who sold him out. He could have taken revenge. It would have been understandable, even justified in human terms.
But he doesn't.
He doesn't. After testing them, he reveals himself and chooses forgiveness and reconciliation. He uses his God-given power not for vengeance, but to save his family, the entire covenant line, from starvation. God takes the brothers' act of profound evil and weaves it into the very means of salvation for them and for many lives. It's the ultimate demonstration of divine providence overcoming human sin.
And Joseph himself articulates this at the end, right? He gives the final word on how to understand everything that happened.
He does. It's the capstone statement for the entire book of Genesis. Near the very end, his brothers are still afraid he'll retaliate after their father Jacob dies, and Joseph reassures them with these incredible words found in Genesis 50, verse 20, "You intended to harm me," or "You planned all this for evil, but God planned it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives."
Wow. You planned it for evil, but God planned it for good.
That line just resonates through the whole story. It connects all the dots: the chaos, the betrayal, the violence, the family dysfunction that came after the perfection of Genesis 1. None of it ultimately could stop God's overarching plan. God's purpose, rooted in his initial goodness and his covenant faithfulness, prevails by working through and in spite of human wickedness to bring about his saving ends. The ruins become the building blocks for redemption.
So that really brings our deep dive full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We started with the beautiful methodical order of creation in days 2 and 3, separation, stability, naming, life according to its kinds. We track the incredibly rapid descent into chaos, the single act of disobedience, the murder, the systemic violence, Noah's immediate failure after the reset. But the story doesn't end there. It lands on this profound certainty. God's plan, initiated through Abram's faith and culminating in Joseph's providential role, will ultimately succeed in saving life, using even human evil to achieve his good purposes.
Precisely. It sets the trajectory for the entire biblical narrative that follows. God's faithfulness is the constant, even when human failure seems overwhelming. And, thinking about that whole arc leads to maybe one last thought, something for you listeners to chew on. We talked about the contrast between Genesis 1, where God speaks things into existence almost effortlessly, let there be, and Genesis 6, where he reacts to human violence and moral choices with deep personal pain, being broken with grief.
Yeah, the effortlessness of initial creation versus the, well, agony involved in relating to morally free humans.
Exactly that. So the question to mull over is this. What does that stark contrast tell you about the value God places on these conscious, self-governing beings he created in his image? Why opt for this messy, painful relationship full of grief and intervention and covenants when he could have just stuck with effortless, non-moral creation? What does the pain he endures reveal about the depth of his love and the significance of human freedom?
It's a lot to think about. The cost of relationship versus the ease of control.
It is. We'll leave you with that mystery to ponder.
A really profound place to end. Thank you for walking us through Genesis 1 and its sprawling consequences. We hope this deep dive helps you see the beginning, not just as a story about how the world was made, but as the foundation for understanding God's persistent faithfulness in the face of our persistent struggles.